You know, you know that feeling when you have this head just completely full of knowledge, like you've done all the reading, you've listened to the lectures, but then the exact moment you need to actually use that info in the real world, you just completely freeze.
Oh, yeah. It is just, I mean, it's a universally frustrating disconnect.
It really is.
We tend to visualize this as having like a massive locked library in our heads, right?
Mhm.
But biologically, it's actually much more like a massive traffic
The
jam.
traffic jam.
Yeah, like all the vocabulary cars are on the highway, but because you're trying to process, grammar rules and pronunciation mechanics and, well, social anxiety all at the exact same time, you've created this massive mental bottleneck. Nothing can move.
Okay, let's unpack this because that traffic jam analogy makes so much sense. And for you, the learner listening to this right now, we know exactly how infuriating that bottleneck can be.
Oh, definitely.
And nowhere is this more obvious than when you're trying to learn a new language. You can watch foreign films, you can listen to deep dives just like this one, and you understand every single word.
Right.
But the second you open your mouth to speak to a real person, the traffic jam hits. The words vanish, and your voice just feels totally locked.
Which really reveals a fundamental reality about the human brain. Comprehending information and producing information, they're handled by entirely different neural pathways.
Wow, really? So they aren't even connected in that way.
Exactly. Being a great listener doesn't automatically make you a great speaker. They're two different beasts.
So to get past this block, we are unpacking some really fascinating methodologies today. These frameworks were originally designed by language experts on the Mr. English channel to unlock the English-speaking voice.
Yeah, and they're incredibly effective.
Right. But as we explore their core concepts, it becomes super clear that this is a much bigger blueprint. We're looking at how to hotwire your brain to take any theoretical knowledge you have and turn it into practical, confident execution.
Right.
It's basically the ultimate roadmap for moving from being a passive receiver of information to an active creator.
And, the first major hurdle we have to clear on that roadmap is our absolute obsession with passive listening. The methodology highlights a really crucial distinction here.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I feel like everyone does this.
Oh, totally. When you have like a language deep dive playing in the background while you're washing dishes or driving to work, you feel productive.
Yeah, you feel like you're learning.
Right, because you're comprehending the words. But passive listening is comfortable because it requires almost zero cognitive load.
Because your focus is split. I mean, you're just surviving the commute and the language is just sort of washing over you.
Exactly.
But if the problem is the output, like the fact that we freeze when we try to speak, it makes sense that we have to fundamentally change the input. We need an active mechanism.
Yes. And the technique they introduced for this is called shadowing.
Shadowing. Okay, so how does that work?
So shadowing is where the real neurological heavy lifting begins. The process involves taking a short piece of audio or video from a native speaker, pressing pause after a sentence, and then repeating that sentence out loud.
Just repeating it verbatim.
Right, but it's more than that. You are attempting to perfectly mimic the speaker's pacing, their intonation, their specific emotional delivery.
It sounds a lot like lip syncing to your favorite song in the bathroom mirror.
Yes, very much like that.
Except you actually have to use your vocal cords and make the sounds.
Yeah.
But I look at this and my immediate instinct is to kind of push back a little. Like I question if this is actually teaching you the language or if you're just blindly repeating sounds like a parrot.
What's fascinating here is that it might feel like parroting at first, but under the hood, you are initiating a massive cognitive shift.
Really? How so?
Well, when you only listen passively, your brain relies on Wernicke's area, which is the region responsible for comprehension. But speaking requires Broca's area, which is the motor center that actually physically orchestrates the movement of your lips, your tongue, your vocal cords.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so shadowing builds a literal neural bridge between the auditory processing center and the motor cortex.
So you're training the physical mechanics of speech. You're basically forcing your ears and your mouth to sync up.
Exactly. You are learning the music of the language. Every language has its own unique rhythm, stress patterns, and physical posture.
Right, and passive listening completely ignores all that muscle memory.
It does. By shadowing, you force your brain out of the passenger seat. You are building the physical bypass lane that will eventually help alleviate that mental traffic jam we talked about.
Okay, so shadowing warms up the machinery. It removes the friction between a thought and the physical act of speaking.
Yes, exactly.
But if I'm only mimicking, that still doesn't solve the core issue of original thought, right? Like, I can mimic a native speaker perfectly on a recording, but the moment I'm alone in my house, the training wheels are off.
Right, you're on your own.
Yeah, so I need a way to transition from copying someone else to generating my own ideas without triggering that panic response.
Which leads right into the concept of English mode.
English mode.
Yeah, the methodology suggests carving out a highly concentrated microblock. We're talking just 5 to 10 minutes a day, where you forcefully shift your internal monologue and your external speech entirely into the target language.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because doing this is going to feel, well, a little ridiculous.
Ooh, incredibly awkward.
Because the most effective way to trigger this mode is by talking to yourself. Like, you essentially narrate your own reality.
Yeah.
You walk into your kitchen and say out loud to an empty room, I am making coffee now. I need a cup. Where is the milk? I can already feel the hesitation you, the learner, might have about doing this. It feels incredibly silly to have a profound conversation with your refrigerator.
It does, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, the awkwardness is actually part of the design.
Wait, really? The awkwardness is intentional?
Yeah. Think about what happens during the freeze in real-world conversation. Your brain is suddenly overwhelmed by the pressure of social interaction, combined with the immense cognitive load of translating thoughts, finding the right vocabulary, and structuring the grammar.
Right. It's the ultimate system overload.
Exactly. By narrating your day out loud, you simulate the pressure of real-time vocabulary retrieval, but you do it in a safe, isolated environment.
Okay, I see.
You're forcing your brain to search for words on demand. When you look at the milk and force yourself to actually vocalize the word milk, you are strengthening the neural retrieval pathway for that specific concept.
And the out loud part seems pretty non-negotiable here, right? Like, you can't just think the sentence in your head.
No, because thinking is frictionless. We often trick ourselves into believing we know a word when we just think it.
Oh, that is so true.
Speaking it out loud is the biological proof that you actually have the vocabulary accessible in your motor cortex.
But let's follow this logic for a second. If I'm practicing in my kitchen, the obvious wall I'm going to hit is missing vocabulary. Sure, I'm going to look at a spatula, or I'm going to try to explain some complex feeling, and I will have absolutely no idea how to say it. And the old school academic instinct is to go buy a stack of flashcards and memorize lists of nouns and verbs, right? Dog, cat, house, refrigerator, spatula.
Right, and that traditional instinct is precisely what the methodology tells us to abandon.
Abandoned entirely.
Completely. Memorizing lists of single isolated words is actually one of the main reasons the freeze happens in the first place.
Wow, okay. Which is a massive pivot. Because, wait, aren't individual words the foundational building blocks of a language?
You'd think so, but no. Instead of single words, the strategy is to memorize chunks.
Chunks?
Yeah, we're talking about groups of words, phrases, or entire sentence starters. Things like, that's a good point, or let me think about that for a second, or you know what I mean.
I mean, learning single words is like, it's like going to the hardware store and buying a massive pile of loose wood, a box of nails, and a saw.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Right. And every single time you want to sit down, you have to build the chair from scratch while someone is just standing there watching you.
Exactly, which is terrifying.
But learning chunks, these preset phrases, that's like buying pre-assembled furniture.
Yeah.
You just walk in, place the chair in the room, and sit down. You bypass the construction phase entirely. It's a massive shortcut.
That is the perfect way to conceptualize it. To understand why this works, we really have to look at the limits of human working memory.
Yeah.
Cognitive science shows us that our brains can only hold about 4 to 7 discrete pieces of information at any given time.
Only 4 to 7. So if I'm relying on single words, my working memory is instantly maxed out.
Instantly. Every single time you want to express a thought, your brain has to become a master architect. You have to find the noun, conjugate the verb, remember the preposition, arrange them in the correct syntactical order, monitor your pronunciation, and then finally push the air out of your lungs.
It simply takes too long. Your working memory overloads, the traffic jam forms, and you just freeze.
Exactly. But chunks act as ready-to-use tools that completely bypass that time-consuming process of mental grammar construction.
Yeah.
You don't actually need to know the grammatical rules of why the phrase, you know what I mean, is constructed the way it is. You just need to know that the whole block of sound conveys a specific feeling of seeking agreement.
And as a byproduct, it instantly makes you sound more natural. Like,
Yeah.
native speakers don't build every sentence from scratch either. They speak in chunks, too.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And beyond sounding natural, these chunks serve a critical mechanical function. They act as a psychological safety net.
How do you mean?
They buy your brain precious seconds during a live interaction, while your mouth is automatically delivering a pre-assembled chunk like, let me see, that's a really interesting question. Your brain is using those 3 seconds of autopilot to formulate the actual substance of your next idea.
Oh, wow. So it keeps the flow of communication moving? You're
Exactly.
keeping the traffic flowing while the heavy cargo gets loaded?
Right.
So, practically speaking, you've got your shadowing routine, you're narrating your day, and you're collecting these pre-assembled chunks. The next logical hurdle is consistency.
Oh, consistency is everything.
And the methodology brings up a fundamental rule of skill acquisition here. Frequency beats duration.
Yes.
Practicing for 5 to 10 minutes every single day is infinitely better than cramming for 2 hours on a Saturday, because speaking is a muscle.
Yeah. The brain doesn't retain language through binge learning. You wouldn't go to the gym once a month for 10 hours and expect to get stronger.
Definitely not.
You have to stimulate the pathways through daily microdoses.
But here's the very real problem for you, the learner. How do you exercise that muscle daily if you are sitting somewhere where you don't have native speakers around to practice with? I mean, you can't just rely on serendipitous encounters at the grocery store.
No, you can't. You have to manufacture the interactions. And the methodology suggests utilizing a tool that most people actively despise, the voice recorder app on your phone. The routine is simple. You ask yourself a daily prompt, something as basic as, what did I do today? You hit record, you answer the prompt using your chunks, and then you force yourself to listen back to the audio.
The universal dread of hearing one's own recorded voice is a massive barrier here. Most people would rather do literally anything else.
It is brutal for a lot of people.
But there's a biological reason for that cringe, isn't there?
There is. When we speak normally, we hear our own voice through bone conduction. The sound vibrates through the bones in our skull, which makes our voice sound deeper, richer, and more resonant to us.
Right.
But when we listen to a recording, we are only hearing air conduction, which is how the rest of the world actually hears us. It sounds thin and unfamiliar, which triggers this instinctive rejection.
So what does this all mean? Are we essentially just pushing past that biological illusion to become our own teachers?
This raises an important question about autonomy in learning. Because yes, you absolutely become your own teacher. By stepping completely outside of your own ego and just listening to that voice memo, you become an objective observer of your own output.
Because you aren't fighting the traffic jam anymore. You can just sit back and listen.
Right. You'll hear that you stumbled over a specific chunk or that you paused for a full 10 seconds trying to find a verb. You identify your own weaknesses in a totally safe environment without the pressure of an audience watching you struggle.
And the digital practice doesn't stop with just voice memos either. The methodology also leans heavily into role-playing, like pretending to order a pizza to the wall and practicing responding using AI chatbots on your phone.
Yeah, because while recording yourself is great for output, a real conversation is a two-way street. It's unpredictable. Unpredictability is the core trigger of the freeze. The methodology refers to this as training your reply speed. When you use an AI chatbot, or even when you just pace around your room role-playing both sides of an argument, you are forcing your brain to react to external stimuli.
You are practicing the pivot.
Exactly.
You process their input, locate your pre-assembled chunk, and immediately generate the output. By artificially simulating these unpredictable turns, you condition your neural pathways. So when you finally face a real human being, the pathways are already primed and ready to fire.
Which brings us to the final and undoubtedly the most significant barrier to execution.
Big one.
Let's assume you've done everything right. You've shadowed the experts, you're narrating your reality, you're relying on chunks, and you are rigorously recording your daily microdoses.
You've put in the work. You're ready.
But the ultimate test is taking all of that preparation out of the safe laboratory of your kitchen and actually deploying it with another human being. This introduces the biggest monster in the room, the fear of making mistakes.
It is entirely paralyzing. The fear that your grammar will be wrong, the fear that people will laugh at your accent, just the fear of looking incompetent.
It's universally terrifying.
But the methodology demands a massive perspective shift here. It argues that mistakes are not red pens on a test. Mistakes are your friends. They are proof that you are brave and actually trying.
Yes. And to understand why this fear is so crippling, we have to look at the neuroscience of anxiety. When you fear social judgment or making a mistake, your brain perceives it as a literal threat to your survival.
A survival threat, just from bad grammar.
Literally, yes. Your amygdala, which is the primitive fear center of the brain, hijacks your system. It triggers a fight or flight response.
And when fight or flight kicks in, your brain starts shutting down non-essential functions to prepare for physical danger.
Including your prefrontal cortex, which is exactly where your higher-order language processing happens. The fear of making a mistake biologically cuts off your access to the vocabulary and grammar you have studied. The freeze isn't just a metaphor, it is a neurological shutdown.
Wow. So embracing mistakes isn't just a nice motivational poster in a classroom. It is a biological necessity to keep the language center of your brain online.
The methodology provides a vital mantra for this. Communication, not perfection. You have to unlearn years of traditional academic conditioning where a mistake was a failure, a deduction of points.
Right.
In the real world, if the other person understands the core of your idea, you win.
It really makes me think of, like, taking damage in a video game boss fight.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. If you're playing a game and your character is taking hits, it means you are actually in the arena playing the game. If your health bar is completely full and you've taken 0 damage, it's not because you're perfect. It's because you're still hiding safely at the starting line, too terrified to even open the door.
That is so true.
The mistakes, the stumbles, the messy grammar that is proof of engagement, you are in the arena.
That perfectly encapsulates the psychology of real-world skill acquisition. When you shift the goalpost, when the only metric for success becomes human connection rather than academic perfection, the amygdala stands down.
The stress dissolves.
Exactly. The prefrontal cortex stays online and the mental block just vanishes.
If I use entirely the wrong verb tense, but you still hand me the cup of coffee I was trying to ask for, I win.
You win.
The transaction was successful. The methodology states a profound truth here. Fluency comes after mistakes, not before.
Right. You cannot wait until you have perfect grammar to start speaking. The messy, uncomfortable process of making errors is the very forge where fluency is created.
It completely inverts how most adults approach learning.
It really does.
We want the guarantee of expertise before we ever step into the arena. We want to read enough books so that we never look foolish. But you have to be willing to be bad at the execution before you can ever earn the right to be good at it.
Absolutely.
This is such a powerful framework for you, the learner. Let's quickly map out this complete journey. The path from having a head full of locked knowledge to executing with unshakable confidence is totally clear now. First, you transition from passive consumption to active engagement.
Right. You shadow. You mimic the physical mechanics to build that neural bypass lane.
Then, you create a low-stakes environment for generation. You narrate your reality out loud, forcing the brain to retrieve information on demand.
Proving that the pathways work. And you stop overwhelming your working memory with single raw materials.
You rely on chunks.
Exactly. Those pre-assembled pieces of furniture that reduce your cognitive load and let you keep the traffic flowing naturally.
You push past the biological cringe of your own voice and leverage your phone as a safe practice space. You record your microdoses, review your output, and practice the unpredictable pivot of conversation with AI or roleplay.
And finally, you defeat the monster. You disarm the amygdala hijack by reframing the entire concept of failure.
You stop viewing mistakes as academic failures and view them as badges of bravery, communication over perfection.
And you know, when you zoom out and look at this entire methodology, it stretches so far beyond just learning English. It is a universal behavioral blueprint.
It really is.
Whether you are trying to learn a complex programming language, or pick up a musical instrument, or step into a high-stakes leadership role at your company, the barriers are identical.
The passive illusion of competence,
Yeah.
the cognitive overload of trying to build everything from scratch, and that paralyzing biological fear of looking foolish.
Overcoming the freeze requires rewiring how you interact with your own potential.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to ponder on today. The framework made it undeniably clear that fluency in absolutely anything comes after the mistakes, not before. So take a hard look at your own life right now. Look beyond language learning. What other skills, what deep passions, or what difficult conversations are you holding yourself back from right now simply because you are waiting for perfection before you even allow yourself to start? Remember, taking damage just means you're finally in the arena. Get out there, open your mouth, and start making some mistakes.